Welcome into K-State Online. We've got the whole gang together. Like I said, we would eventually, just a day later than what I was planning on. Mainly my fault for that. So, obviously, K-State has a new head basketball coach, and we're going to talk a lot about Casey Alexander tonight. Really, only about Casey Alexander tonight, who will be introduced on Monday at 11 a.m. So we will be there. Just like the Colin Klein press conference, we'll stream that live over on the KSO YouTube. So for any of you that are out there that are like, oh, I want something easier to pick up and stream with, YouTube, I think, is even easier than ESPN Plus or, Facebook. So we will carry that for you over on the KSO YouTube. And that way you can hear what Casey Alexander has to say. K-State obviously familiar with the whole ordeal in hiring a new basketball coach in that press conference in the Shamrock Zone, because 4 years ago they were doing it with Jerome Tang. So we are going to go a little bit deeper into it because obviously Drew and I only got about 30 minutes in right after it all happened. It was basically bedtime. Everybody wanted to sleep. I just assumed that Fan was already in bed or didn't want to get out of bed to talk about it. So I was like, well, we'll bring him in later. And so we get his perspective on this as our number one basketball man at KSO. And we'll have a bunch of different angles to kind of attack this with. I want to start it off with this, though, because a lot of talk has been made, including one thread on the KSO message boards, that Casey Alexander's resume is worse than you think, is what the thread was titled. You can kind of see the resume there. I left Stetson off there because he was only there for 2 seasons. But look, the fact that he was able to go and get a job to bounce up a little higher after being at Stetson for only 2 years, where they didn't win at an overwhelming rate, should probably tell you something. So then he goes to Lipscomb. He's there for 6 seasons, has pretty decent success in NCAA tournament and an NIT runner-up, where they ended up beating NC State and TCU along the way before losing to Texas in the NIT championship. And then he gets to go home. He played at Belmont, coached there for 16 seasons as an assistant before he went and got his own head coaching job, and has been really good at Belmont since then. But one of the criticisms that people have thrown out there for Casey Alexander is, well, how dominant was he in these leagues? And only 2 auto bids in the NCAA tournament. Now, I'll preface this with guys that have, coached a little bit less of a time at a certain level. Drew wants to note here that they also beat Wes Miller during that run at Greensboro. So guy just got fired, Drew. Can we take it easy on Wes Miller?
Well, he's about to be the rare coaching Marfo, because I would assume that he's just going to go back to UNCG.
Yeah, well, something about North Carolina, Mac Brown did it. So has anybody else done that in the state of North Carolina? It feels like a popular move there. That'll be good for Wes Miller. He's a guy that, if Josh Pastner was getting second cracks at being a power conference head coach, certainly I would think that somebody's going to kick the tires on Wes Miller again in the future. But anyways, back to what I'm trying to say here. You can look at the Casey Alexander resume, a very simplistic resume there. 15 seasons at those 3 schools, 627 win percentage, 4 regular season conference titles, and 2 times he claimed the auto bid, because that was the basis of a lot of people's gripes, was that 15 years, he only has won his conference tournament twice, and most notably, they crapped the bed against Drake last week and lost in their first game at the Missouri Valley tournament. It wasn't particularly close. Now, the one thing that I would say there is it kind of based off of the way that they've played. Teams are due for losses, and Drake had a good night, a special night there. But the basis for what I'm bringing here is a tweet that the great Cyclone Larry posted that I don't think enough people understood what he was trying to do there. He was trying to expose a lot of UK State fans as non-ball knowers out there, or probably even some in his own Iowa State circles, for not understanding what was going on. Now, some people did pick up on it, but just to reference the tweet in question for everybody, because I saw it and I immediately knew what he was doing. He goes, all caps, Kansas State hired a mid-major coach with just 2 tournament appearances in 15 years and a 627 winning percentage, with the crying emojis, which what he's doing here is TJ Otzelberger had a 611 win percentage in 5 seasons as a head coach at South Dakota State UNLV, and only had made it to 2 NCAA tournaments. And by the way, his track record at UNLV those couple seasons, they weren't like very good or impressive necessarily at UNLV.
You don't
Most
think
of it
that
was built up at
29 and
South Dakota State.
you don't think 29 and 30 and 2 seasons at UNLV is good?
No, I don't believe that to be good. So then that got me thinking, okay, who are some other guys in the Big 12? And there were a few others that had just come up from that level, but I was like, I don't want to compare to them because, if I'm bringing up Steve Lutz or Ross Hodge, people are going to be like, well, their teams suck. And okay, that's fair. So, Grant McCasland is one that's been brought up. Dude coached 7 seasons at Arkansas State, North Texas, 668 win percentage, so a little better there. 2 regular season titles, 1 auto bid. Okay, so we're starting to see where this is going. Now, here's another guy that I'm going to throw out.
Grant McCasland's team also famously crapped the bed in the Conference USA tournament at that time,
Yes.
right before K-State was in the process of hiring a new basketball coach. And that I remember that time on the boards, everybody was so in on McCasland, and everybody like jumped off the bandwagon after they lost in the Conference USA tournament. And he's turned out to be really good.
Yeah, so there's some Big 12 coaches for you. Now, I've got another one that I think is actually, in some respects, probably a lot more interesting. He's in his first season as a Power Conference head coach. Anybody got any guess where I'm going with this next one? There's some history here with K-State in this coach.
I had a guess until you said history.
Yeah, he has a very notable loss to K-State in his career.
Is it Ryan Odom?
It is Ryan Odom, Drew. Okay. Good job. 9 seasons at UMBC, Utah State, and VCU before getting the job at Virginia this year. 645 win percentage, 2 regular season titles, 2 auto bids, and he did get 1 at large at Utah State, but he never won the Mountain West at Utah State. So he claimed an auto bid during his time with the Aggies. But there you go. I thought that one was kind of interesting. And now we can get even crazier with the comparisons because any guesses what Dan Hurley was doing before he got to UConn? In 8 seasons at Wagner and Rhode Island, 589, only made it to the NCAA tournament once, only won his league once during the regular season. And then Todd Golden, less seasons, but in 3 years, didn't ever win his league, didn't do anything in the conference tournament, did get one kind of historic at large with San Francisco out of the West Coast Conference with a 613 win percentage before ultimately taking over at Florida and winning the national championship last season. And one last time to drive home this point of basing Casey Alexander negatively off of the fact that, he hasn't made it to the NCAA tournament that much. The golden goose of this cycle, who St. Louis just made a masterful overpay to, Josh Schertz, 5 seasons, Indiana State, St. Louis, 657 win percentage. Okay, good. 2 regular season titles. That is decent. 0 auto bids. And he also notably crapped the bed earlier today against Dayton in the A-10 tournament. And by the way, if anybody's worried about hangovers and worrying about other things going on, don't check out what has gone down with St. Louis over the last month of the season. They are sitting here, 5-4 or no, 4-4 in their last 8 games. And a person, notably me, would like to make the case to keep St. Louis out of the NCAA tournament. So they are turning into the fraud of all frauds. And this also goes back to us patting ourselves on the back for a lot of us questioning, is Josh Schertz really the best coach this cycle? I think he's fine. But at the end of the day, I think St. Louis has made a mistake. So I just want to throw those out there. Any reactions, any thoughts to my rationale?
I think you make good points. The NCAA tournament is important, but I think it gets overemphasized sometimes in these coaching searches, and sometimes magical runs in the tournament get more credence than maybe they should. I think there's value in looking at coaches that consistently win at that level. And by this point, Casey Alexander has a 10-year record, which, people question, well, why do you wait so long to make this jump? I think part of it was, I'd say probably 5 or 6 years ago, I think maybe he thought, I'm just going to be the next Rick Bird. I'm going to stay at Belmont 20 years and win a bunch of games and see what happens. And then he starts getting poached over and over and over for his best players. And he probably got to the point he was like, why should I do this? Why should I be the developmental program for Power Five programs that want to just come get my kids when they become really good players? Because that's been his key. Like, he's clearly identified talent, he's developed talent, and they've gone on to be Power Five guys, 4 or 5 guys in the last few years, and then be a first round draft pick. So I think that's a big part of why maybe he's coming now, and he didn't jump maybe 3 or 4 years ago when they were winning the OVC, and he had proven, I won at Lipscomb, I replaced Rick Bird, my mentor, I'm winning again. Probably he could have jumped then to some P5 program, but he was content, and now he's reached the point where it makes no sense for me to stay at this level if I'm just going to get my players taken from me every year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, I think that's perfectly fine rationale. And if you gave Casey Alexander some truth serum, I bet that he would probably say that's one of the reasons that he is leaving. Is like, if I was a coach and all of my best players were going to like Tennessee, North Carolina, and then Minnesota, and then Florida over and over and over again, I would be tired of trying to figure that out and replace that. And nobody talks about, so I'm going to talk about it here, of how impressive it is that he kept winning when his best players kept repeatedly getting poached. Like, the fact that he kept this afloat and kept losing his best players and kept getting top 2, top 3, and then winning the Missouri Valley this season is extremely impressive to me. And he has another legitimate NBA draft prospect at Belmont this season. So if you look at what he has done, the NCAA tournament success or lack thereof is like probably the one knock that you could possibly have on Casey Alexander's resume, because he has won so consistently. And like we pointed out in our initial reaction show, we talked about it a little bit during the entire coaching process. The guy's won 20 plus games, 10 consecutive seasons. If he does that again at K-State next year, 2 years, 3 years from now, he's going to make the NCAA tournament if K-State wins 20 plus games in the regular season. Like, something would have had to, the Big 12 would have had to take a drastic step back, or for whatever reason, K-State couldn't win a single quad 1 game in those 20 wins. Like, this year, UCF has won 20 games. We don't think that they're a very good basketball team, but they're still safely in the NCAA tournament because they've won 20 games in the Big 12.
I mean, West Virginia wins 20 games this year if they just don't lose to Utah and K-State. So it can be a pretty easy thing to go out and do. Looking at obviously the general resume of what he's done is impressive. And I think to the point about, sticking around, leaving, some guys like, I flash Ryan Odom up there, but like, he bounced around a bunch of lower tier jobs. And most notably, like, leaving Utah State for VCU was kind of an interesting move. But if you're a guy like Casey Alexander, there's not much reason to leave a place like Belmont once you get there, when you've played there and you spent so much time there, especially in the way that things are constructed right now.
And he's in their Hall of Fame.
Yeah, until you're getting, that next big bump up, which, he probably had some indication that maybe it would come, because I would doubt that this is the first school to ever reach out to him and get some insight and see if he might be the guy. But like, why leave one bid league to go to another one bid league? And especially like if you're already at home, like, this is going to be the thing for that K-State gets with Colin Klein as their head coach in football, is that, like, it's going to take something really, really special for Colin Klein to leave K-State. Colin Klein is not going to leave K-State if, South Carolina calls him up, or if, Northwestern gives him a call. Like, yes, those are SEC and Big Ten schools, but he's not leaving for that. Like, I think the only time that you start getting worried if you're a K-State fan is if he does so well at K-State that at some point one of those top 6 jobs in the country calls. And even then, like, you just wonder, is a guy like that going to accept that if he goes, well, I can do this all in the Big 12. It's going to give me easier access to win conference titles, which is the most important thing at K-State. He gets to still be the man in Manhattan. His family gets to be close to everything that they love and that they're around. And it's, to get into the playoff is easier. Yes, you may not win the national championship, but like the Klein family went to K-State. Like in college football, K-Staters understand nobody in this league's ever winning the national title unless the oil money really kicks into high gear for Texas Tech. Like Cody Campbell's going to have to start spending a lot more apparently for them to actually win the national championship. Probably have to spend a lot more to even score a point in the college football playoff. Like, why would you come into it with that expectation? So I think that there is a level there where K-State probably benefits from that on the football front. So just from the success and the resume perspective, I understand why it would give some people some pause, but I would also say there are plenty of instances out there where teams regret making the coach that went on, the magic run. And that's kind of what did it for his lower tier job. And then they move him up. You want more of that sustained and consistent success. And specifically in this circumstance with K-State, like Drew alluded to, the talent that he's been able to bring in, and then when he loses it, bring in other talent that keeps sustaining at the same level. That's probably pretty attractive to K-State, because you do start to believe, okay, if you do that at K-State, you're going to give yourself the opportunity with better players and the ability to retain them to keep building on that to where he'll probably make it to more NCAA tournaments if he's even a decent coach. And you're probably looking at winning a couple of games. Like K-State fans seem pretty satisfied with the job that Frank Martin did. He only made it out of the first weekend one time, but he won that first game a lot and then lost the second one, and people seemed okay with that. So I just think it'll be interesting to see. That first team will mean a lot. And I don't know that the expectation would be that K-State makes the NCAA tournament, but they're going to be in the neighborhood of being able to do so because of resources. And I believe what Casey Alexander has done over his time at Belmont and Lipscomb.
Yeah, that's going to be the key is raising up this level, building the same type of talent, and then finding that same kind of success. And you just never know in a coaching search. We've talked about this many times. We've talked about this process. And once you get your guy, then you just give him the resources that he has and let him build what he's going to build. The one thing I think we know about Casey Alexander is he's got a system in place, and he's not going to deviate from it. He's not going to waver year to year and try to find something new just because he wants to recruit a certain player or whatever. I think he knows he wants to run a motion offense that's got a lot of freedom and openness to it to allow his players to go get the best shot they can get. He's going to want to play pretty physical, tough defense, but not take a bunch of chances. They're not going to try to make a bunch of steals, but they're going to make you make tough shots, and they're going to make you have your worst shooter shoot the ball. Like that's kind of his philosophy on defense. So he's got a system. He's had that system. He's developed that system for 30 years now. He spent 15, 16 years with Rick Byrd, then now 15 years as a head coach, and has kind of tried to learn. You don't like to see you like the guy that has never failed, but part of me likes that in his early coaching career, he did fail. Like he struggled at Stetson. He struggled his first couple of years at Lipscomb before he's had this 10-year streak of 20 wins. So there's going to be a little bit of perspective there and probably some humility on his part and the ability to handle when things go south. Because I think that was one thing we saw in this last era with Jerome Tang is when things went south, they were so hyped up when things were going good and on social media and getting things out there that when things went south, it went south in a hurry, and they had no answer. And I think there's a little bit more quietness. You don't see Casey Alexander on Twitter. You don't see him out there making a lot of noise on social media, which, you enjoy that when you win. But honestly, that just causes distractions and sometimes keeps things out of perspective. And I kind of appreciate that we maybe don't have to deal with that for a while.
I legitimately couldn't even find the guy on social media. Like it is nice to have what Mason has dubbed as like an adult in the room as a basketball coach. Like he is a no nonsense type of guy. I went and everybody talks great when things are going well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go see how he handled the diversity, kind of like Fan just talked about. And I watched his press conference after they got their butts kicked by Illinois State, right as the regular season ended, and then watched it after the loss to Drake. And it was very refreshing to see like his perspective and that he was very accountable of how things went after both of those losses. Because I mean, if they wouldn't have lost to Illinois State, they were in the running with a weak bubble that if they would have gotten to the conference tournament championship of Arch Madness, like that they were probably going to be a legitimate, maybe last four team in and maybe playing Dayton or be on that first four out. And instead they ended up losing that and then they lost to Drake and then their season was just done. So it was really interesting to hear his perspective of those two losses and really being accountable and not just like blaming a system and talking about how everything is bad and college athletics and college basketball and the rules keep changing. So that was very nice, especially because, if you are Casey Alexander, you probably are pretty mad and upset by the rule changes because you can't really have a program totally in place because of how everything goes at mid-major schools now because your best players are leaving. But it is very nice. The bar is on the floor for the first season. Like we just saw a team that was probably going to be more talented, I would say, than what we're going to see year one of Casey Alexander. But we didn't see very much being accountable when things are going bad, and that's how you end up with a 13 or an 11-20 record, and you just have an embarrassment of all embarrassment of seasons. This upcoming season, I don't think that they will have as much top end talent, but he has a plan in place. It has worked everywhere he's been, and he has the ability to really overachieve with this first roster potentially. And I'm excited to see what it really looks like. This is a season where I think that if you're thinking that, oh, they better make the NCAA tournament or like this thing isn't going to work out, you're probably having a little bit too high of expectations. Like, I think that a reasonable expectation going into year one would be like still on the bubble and playing meaningful games in February and into the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I would go and look, last year, before conference play started, Oklahoma State was 8-3. So, this year with the way that the schedules worked out, they would be 10-3 in all likelihood. Like that's kind of what you're looking for. Basically, what we were saying K-State should try to be this year in non-conference play. And I imagine that they will play a weaker non-conference schedule next year. That would just be good schedule making by anybody coming into a first year team with unknown situations.
I think the only two games that we know for next year are home game against Creighton, and I think that there's an away game at Seton Hall for next year. I would be okay if all the rest are bye games.
And 3 players era games that are going to be, baked in somehow, which, could be against a varying level of teams, but you would figure that there's a pretty good baseline.
If that's even around next year with how
Here's the deal.
Disastrous
I'm not doubting that it'll still be around because, like, what do teams have to lose? Do you go to Maui and not make any money, or do you go to the players era and you might make some money? You just don't know. Like, I'm not gonna poo-poo the players era yet for its longevity. Now, certainly, I'm not saying that guys are going to make their money off of it or whatever, but like that's kind of what you're looking at. I would say for next year, and that's fine. Like you just want to kind of be in that neighborhood, put something together, and see what happens. At least give yourself the opportunity to do some things moving forward. Okay, so in terms of what there is to like about, also real quick, Drew, you were talking about, going and seeing like real adversity, accountability. Like I want people to understand it's a new coach. So let's just get on the same page about what accountability is. Accountability is not saying that, it's on me, it's on the coaches, it's on whatever, like that we lost, that we were bad. Maybe start to give us some reasons why that happened and how you're going to fix them. Because like when you're in a job and somebody comes and says, hey, you've been struggling in these areas, like what are we going to do to fix that? You don't just go, believe me, I'm gonna have it fixed. And if you don't believe me, like don't be on the bandwagon anymore. It's like, okay, buddy, you're fired. Like you have to actually give a plan of how you're going to fix things. So that's what I'm looking for moving forward. But in terms of what there is to like about Casey Alexander on the court, so not the wins and losses, but how he styles his basketball team and what you expect him to bring to K-State. What stands out to you, fan?
I think people have talked about it, but in general, but the offensive ability of his teams has been impressive, and specifically the shot making ability of his teams. He has said the best or most important individual stat for breaking down either offense or defense is effective field goal percentage. That's what he hangs his hat on, and they've been really good at it. Number one in the country this year. Top 15, 5 of his 7 years at Belmont. Top 40 every year at Belmont. So he builds his teams to get good shots, both from 3 and from 2. They've been top 4 in the country in 2-point percentage in top 10 in 4 of his seasons. And then they've been top 25 in 3-point percentage the last 4 seasons at Belmont. So it's both sides. I listened to several podcast interviews with him. They play with pace, but he said there's no like stipulations. We want a shot in this many seconds. And he said, we don't even look at the shot clock. We don't even think about the shot clock. He teaches his team to get the ball up the floor as quick as possible, make or miss. He likes to run on made baskets. And the goal is to get the best shot before the defense is set. That's the goal of his offense, is to get the best shot before the defense is set. He runs a motion, but it's a motion with a lot of freedom. I'd call it maybe like a modern motion. It's not the old school Bobby Knight motion, but it's a motion. And this is going to be the thing. We're going to have players moving without the ball, which is something we haven't really seen at K-State in a long, long time. And we're going to see screening. We're going to see flares. We're going to see all kinds of actions away from the ball, because that's what he believes in. And he teaches it as concepts. Like, he doesn't run set plays. And he doesn't even have his point guard call set plays. The offense is initiated by the action of the point guard, whether he cuts across the floor, whether he dribble hands off, and what he does after he gets rid of the ball. And that's the thing. You have to have smart players to run what he wants to run. But that system in allowing his players freedom, because he said the biggest thing people are going to get frustrated with when they watch his teams, and this was at Belmont, is shot selection, especially early in the season. We're going to see shots that are like, what in the world is going on? But he tells another interview, he said he tells every player he recruits they have the green light when they get to Belmont. But he does say, at the end of the day, the cream rises to the clock or the top. And players either figure out what is a good shot or they don't. And if they don't figure out what is a good shot, they don't play. So he's got a system with accountability and teaches what the good shot is and how to get it. And then the players figure it out. And to me, that's exciting to watch. Like this is Mason Voth basketball.
It's music to my ears.
Like it seems like this is going to be something that's going to be really fun to watch. It may have some ugliness at times because you're going to see players taking shots as they learn what a good shot is. But regardless of that, I think that is what basketball is about at the end of the day. They also do a pretty good job taking care of the ball. Low turnover rates. This past year, they actually had a pretty high turnover rate nationally, but most of the time they're in the top 100. They're not a big offensive rebounding team, and they're not a big free throw rate team.
Too busy making shots to rebound.
Well, they are too busy making shots. Another comment I heard him say is that he does not just want his guys to drive the ball, because I think there's a lot of teams that say drive it and hope you get fouled. He doesn't believe in that mantra. He would rather have a great shot than driving and taking a bad shot. He talked about in practice that when they play 5-on-5, they keep score, but they'll have guys make threes, but if it's a bad three, they don't count it. They'll have guys drive and make tough shots in the paint, but if they make it and it's a bad shot, they don't count it. So he does everything he can to teach his players what is a good shot and what is a bad shot, and how to be a smart basketball player, which I know I've heard you say the last couple of years, Mason, talking about dumb basketball over and over and over. And I think we're not going to see that anymore. And again, that free throw rate aspect of how he plays, that's a big reason, is because he does not want to just drive and shoot bad shots. And he doesn't want his players doing that. And so they're not going to get to the free throw line a lot, but they are going to take good shots, and they're going to make shots more often than not just because of the way they play.
Yeah, fan, you guys, I don't think can see it. Is there a notes tab on your screen somewhere over there? And I don't know if it shows you my notes that I've written down, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to come back to what you're talking about there. I just wrote down not dumbasses, because I have been preaching that for basically 3 full seasons now, that I look around and I go, boy, this team's not very smart. Like, I always think, like, watching my brothers grow up playing basketball, and they would get out there and they'd be playing with guys, and, you know, they would have a pretty good idea of what to do, what not to do. Cause, like, you know, coaching can only do so much for you. Like, you're making the plays out there. You have to be able to do that yourself. And I can remember my dad and I always talking about how, you know, they understand they may not be the most talented out there, but the reason why, like, we've always had a good understanding is because in our house, the only thing that we watch is college basketball and college football and stuff like that, and a lot of baseball. So by watching things and not just doing them, you have the understanding. And like I always said, that I thought probably the best thing that you could get like a middle school or high school basketball player to do is to make him go sit down and watch, you know, a college basketball game, or probably more than anything, a women's college basketball game, because it would probably more closely mimic the style that they're playing, just so you can see, oh, they didn't do this, they did that. Like, and so I think that, like, that's been a big part. My whole life has been this, hey, you have to be a smart basketball player to be able to go through this. And the first time this really came out was, I don't know how much you guys remember this, but when K-State got blasted by Nebraska at home, Tank's second season, there were things that happened in that game and that leading up to that, where I had started to kind of question some things. And Fred Hoiberg comes in there, and the very first thing he says is that we just didn't play smart basketball in the first half. And then what turned it around and, you know, led to them dominating K-State in that second half was how they played. And so I asked Jerome Tang about, you know, if he thought that was the difference, and what he could grade their basketball IQ at. And he didn't really, you know, like most times I asked him a question, I didn't get anywhere close to a good answer. So it stuck with me. And then it got worse, by the way. Like, I would have killed for that second season team the last 2 years at K-State, based off of what we saw. And so it just wasn't there. And so hearing that, like, the way that things are set up, you're trying to build a smarter basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, maybe you do take a dumb loss in November, but the goal would be that by the time that you're getting to January and February, you're not taking multiple dumb losses. Like, you can get the bad result type of performance against Drake where, hey, you know, stuff happens, but you're not going to, you know, like Jerome Tang did in year one. K-State lost the Big 12 championship that year because they lost back-to-back games to bad Texas Tech and Oklahoma teams. And you just wonder, like, if anything had been different there, and maybe some tweaks with how they were coached and the way that those players played, maybe K-State ends up with a Big 12 title that first year. So, yes, music to my ears to hear how this is setting up for Casey Alexander. And this is one of those deals where during the process, like, you start to feel like everybody thinks Josh Hurts is the number one guy this cycle. So it's like, what am I missing there? You know, well, then Jared Calhoun, you know, Alan Huss tossed out there, and Casey Alexander was always kind of in that 4 or 5 mix. You think with them, and you start to look at it and you go, well, there's a lot of stuff I do like about Alexander, and like, maybe this is, and I think that's probably what won over Gene Taylor once he started talking to him and understood, and why they felt like they could move on from Calhoun and not wait and play his game was I think K-State believes they've found something really good in Casey Alexander. And it doesn't mean it works out, but it also means that I think K-State, at the end of the day, viewed Casey Alexander on the same level that they did Jared Calhoun when things were all said and done.
Yeah, they are a very smart team. You have to be very smart to play for Casey Alexander, as Fan pointed out. The thing that excites me about on the court is something that Fan kind of alluded to a little bit, but the ball will constantly be moving with Belmont as well. Like his teams always have a really high assist rate. Like we're going to be seeing the ball move and players move more than I think that we've seen the ball and players move in Mason and I's lifetime. Like this is a true offensive first head coach. The defense has had stretches in his career where it's been good, some stretches where it's been bad. I think that recruiting at this level, the defense will get better because he'll just have better athletes at this level than he probably did at Belmont and at Lipscomb. But I'm really excited about what this can be on the court because I really like smart basketball players too. I talked about it the day that this was announced that like Casey Alexander and I kind of see the game the same way, like very analytical, very 3-point or get to the lane and take a good shot minded. It's the new era of basketball too, so it's just very exciting to think about what he can do from an offensive perspective. And I mean, this season we thought that we were going to see one of the best shooting teams at K-State. Matthew Driscoll will say that it was, but it actually was not anywhere close. They made the most, but by percentage, it was not even close. So I'm excited to see what that looks like because, I mean, a lot of his teams can shoot 40% as a team from three, which is incredible. And this team shot 41% from three. And like I pointed out, again, when Casey Alexander was hired, one of the guys that I really want from Belmont was only 28%. And you expect him to shoot the ball better next season. So it's very exciting. If you don't like 3-pointers, you just don't like fun basketball. Like I saw people when I said that over the last handful of years at Belmont, Alexander's had a top 25 3-point percentage team. And I had people saying that that was like going to be annoying or a bad thing or like, more threes. Like, what do you want them to do? Take mid-range jumpers all day? Like, 3 is worth more than 2. If you can make them, why are you not going to shoot them?
Yeah. That's the thing. They're making them right now. Like his last 4 teams at Belmont have been at the very worst 21st in the country in 3-point percentage. So, take as many threes as you want if you're knocking them down at that rate. Like that's not going to be annoying. What was annoying for K-State was that, it was built up to be this big deal, and then they got into Big 12 play. And I don't know what they finished, but like they were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in conference play this season. I believe. Let's see. They finished 14th in Big 12 play in 3-point shooting. So like that's what's annoying is when you're taking shots and you're missing them. But Casey Alexander's teams, specifically this past one at Belmont, they didn't miss a lot of shots.
Yeah, and they I think 46% of their shots were threes. So there's a balance there, and he's not quite. I think Rick Byrd was usually 1 or 2 or 3 in the country in 3-point rate. Alexander's dropped a little bit. I think he'll take not mid-range jumpers, but like in the paint jumper shots if you get them. I think there must be something where he doesn't view those as bad of a shot.
I was about to say, and I would even consider that a better shot than like a free throw line jumper.
Yeah. So that I think that's where, because I was listening to a podcast in 2 years ago, I think, or 3 years ago, they were hitting like almost 70% on shots at the rim, but they were toward the bottom of the country in the percentage of shots at the rim. And they asked him about that, and he said, "Well, you can't really force those things to happen with the way they run offense, Because if you tried to force those shots at the rim, you probably bring that percentage down, and you probably bring up your turnover rate because you're trying to force things that aren't there in the offense. Because he's going to use his motion to get the best shot he can and what the defense gives you. And since he doesn't drive it and try to draw a lot of contact on driving the basketball, you're not going to get those free throws attempts. But he does teach when you get the ball at the rim, you're going to go off 2 feet and go through people's chests and all those things coaches talk about when they talk about how you attack the rim at the rim. So he's got those things in place. I just think it's interesting. You know, he's been a 4-out, 1-in guy most of his career. I think he talked about how they deviated from that a little bit as they bumped into the Missouri Valley Conference, because you really couldn't have that kind of slow plotting post player at that level. So I think that's probably something he will bring with him. It's almost like 4.5 out, where you can have your 5-man out on the perimeter. Really 4 out, even though guys will be listed as forwards, they're more like wings at the 4 spot, the way he's going to play. And all those guys are going to be moving. All those guys are going to be setting screens. All those guys are going to be cutting with all kinds of actions. Because he did make the point, like he coached a guard at Lipscomb. I can find Garrison Matthews, who's now in the NBA. He was a player of the year in the ASUN when he was at Lipscomb. And he said Garrison Matthews jokes with him that he didn't call plays for him. But he talked about how the best players end up with the ball, and the best players end up taking most of your shots if everyone else understands their roles. Then he talks about where those guys get a lot of shots also is off set plays and off underneath out of bounds plays and off sidelines out of bounds plays and off last second of the half plays. And so those guys get the majority of their shots for the team in those places. And then they just end up taking the most shots because they do have a little more freedom to take tougher shots as well. So I thought that was interesting that he doesn't just call out plays for guys because he thinks, well, we got to get this guy a shot. He said when the guy gets hot and makes 2 or 3 in a row, he may call a play, but he doesn't just do it just because that guy hasn't got a shot in a while. He expects the offense to find the ball to that player and him to get a shot. Again, all stuff that I like to hear, all stuff that I think will make for fun basketball, as long as he can find the players that fit, and I think he will be able to do that.
Real quick, just for those that might be curious, when you bring up a guy that is in the NBA, Garrison Matthews is in his 7th year in the NBA, like has consistently been making NBA paychecks and has played in, at least 45 games every season since his 2nd year in the league. Now he's not going to be on track for that this year. But like, to me, that sticks out a little bit because, you can always hear, oh, this guy's in the NBA. And it's like, he played like 2 games like Marquise Noel, which again, like this isn't to run down what Marquise Noel did at K-State, but it's also one of those where like him having guys that have this longevity of sorts, I think is important at that level. And, another guy that he had at Belmont, Ben Shepherd, he's in his 3rd season in the NBA, and he's played in at least 55 games every season in his first 3 years with the Pacers. I mean, he played in 63 games last year, about 20 minutes a game for a team that, went to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So, like, he is producing legitimate guys that are not just going off to other schools, but, like, he's getting them to the NBA, and they are players that are capable of truly providing a contribution and lasting. So all of this, I think, means something and kind of puts a stamp of approval on what he's been able to do. And again, I know that there's no guarantee this works for K-State, but, we just had somebody post on the board, and I don't know if they're trying to troll or if they're being, dense on purpose, but they said that this is the longest of long shot hires that K-State's ever made in their life. And it's like, he's not even like one of the 3 biggest long shot basketball coaches that K-State's hired since I was alive. Like Woldridge, Frank, and Tang were all greater long shots than the guy that has 15 years of coaching experience and has, done pretty well, 20 plus wins the last decade, nonstop each season. So like nothing's ever a guarantee that it works out. But like we talked about during this whole process, as long as K-State didn't get past him, there was going to be reason for optimism and to like the hire. And obviously, the more that we've had time to dive into this and compare situations, you can look at it and just kind of go, oh, well, like there wasn't a great difference between the number 1 coach in this cycle and the number 4 coach, in whatever order you want to throw the top 4 that K-State seemed interested in. But we do know that there was a pretty big drop off after that, it feels like.
I would even say the longevity that he's done it and the players that he's produced and developed has made him a lot more attractive than I even would have thought about. Because I remember Garrison Matthews at Lipscomb and his run in the NBA now, but like Ben Shepherd was somebody that I'd forgotten about. Like I knew Jacoby Gillespie came from Belmont, but forgot about some others. So like he is one of the best. I'm going to call this a low major job now. The Missouri Valley is a 1-bid league. Like, he's the best low major talent evaluator in the game right now. And now he gets to do that at K-State, where he's going to have the money and the resources to find the talent that he had at Belmont and get that to stick around. Like, that should excite some people.
Well, and Drew, you've been digging into his recruiting because they have 4 signees right now.
They have 4 signees right now. One, his name is Jalen Alexander, not Casey's boy.
Hey, by the way, did you know that Casey actually does have a boy named Mason? So we know he's a great decision maker already.
Jalen Alexander is the highest rated signee that Belmont has ever had. He's in the top 200. Very comparable to like Xavier Wilson for that K-State got last cycle in the ratings. Would assume that he's somebody that he would really want. He could also be somebody that rises later on when the rankings are finalized. Legitimately, because of how the previous staff just chose to not recruit high schoolers. I couldn't tell you if ratings are finalized high school wise yet. But Jalen Alexander was the Max Preps Alabama Player of the Year this season. Really quick point guard, can shoot, obviously, because that's a requirement for Casey Alexander. A really good passer as well, and that really excited me about what he could bring to the table. And an interesting note, because this is kind of goes hand in hand with recruiting, right? Is what does he do with them? A lot of freshmen at Belmont redshirt, and they stuck with their redshirt and kept playing and didn't transfer anywhere else. So I'm interested to see what that kind of philosophy looks like, especially if he brings in like a Jalen Alexander. Another guy that intrigues me because I think he would be one of the better athletes that K-State's gotten from the high school basketball perspective in a long time is Devin Hutcherson. He's a wing from Georgia, like 6'4", 6'5", really long arms. If you want a big-time dunker and driver, that's your guy. Like, he is like the old-school slasher type of 2-guard or 3 that can get to the rim, can shoot a little bit, does his best work off the ball. So like that's a very intriguing thing for me. Also, Jalen Alexander is a true point guard. It wouldn't be like trying to force that circle into the square peg or the square into the circle. Like, he is a point guard that can handle the ball and is very comfortable doing it. Another guy that they got from this cycle was Jake Feldhaus. I believe would be how you pronounce his name. He's from Kentucky. Probably more of a 4 and a little bit of a stretch 4. 6'8", can handle the ball. The competition level that he plays at in Kentucky, and this is based off of me watching him and not really diving into it a lot. The competition level looks awful. Like, so you got to take what he did with a grain of salt a little bit, because he had some crazy numbers. Like, he averaged 22 and 11 as a junior. And then this past season, 20.8 points and 13.2 rebounds. Was the Kentucky Region 11 Player of the Year. What intrigues me about him and what makes me wonder if like he's somebody that Casey Alexander would bring, big time basketball family. His grandpa played for Adolph Rupp at Kentucky. His dad played for not just one Hall of Famer in college, but two.
Do,
His
hey, do
dad
we
played,
know what year on the grandfather? Probably a little,
uh,
probably younger than the guys that cheated K-State out of a national championship
I would
and were
probably
taking
say
bribes from the mob.
I would probably say a little too. He's probably a little bit younger than that. But his dad didn't just play for one Hall of Famer. Played for two. He played for both Eddie Sutton and Rick Pitino,
Oh
and
wow.
scored 1,000 points in his college career. So like he comes from a big time basketball family. So I wonder if that's somebody that he would try to bring. And then the fourth one is Charlie Gersmel would be how I would pronounce it again. Probably more of that old school three that does all the dirty work, gets a lot of rebounds, willing to do literally everything that the coaches ask him to do. You know that he is a like down and dirty physical basketball player when I'm watching him, and some of his film has him just setting screens and setting flares and really kind of being a part of like what their emotion offense was. So that would kind of be what he could potentially bring to the table, as like a guy that will literally do anything that Casey Alexander and his staff want him to do to win a basketball game. Like he's a big time offensive rebounder. And I know that we talked about that Belmont doesn't really do that much, but like it is intriguing that two of their signees that they got in this class both were huge rebounders, and especially on the offensive end.
So here's what's interesting about it. I would imagine that at least one of these guys probably ends up on K-State's roster next year.
I would even say like it's probably likely that at least two. Like K-State
yeah.
is probably flipping an entire roster.
Yeah, yeah. I think because like to me it feels like Alexander and Hutcherson are basically like automatic. Why not? You know, if they'll come. And then I think Feldhaus is kind of intriguing.
You
To
could
look
ask
at
him about
and
his
see.
grandpa's, about his what year his grandpa was there if he comes to K-State.
Yeah, I might have to dig into the basketball reference and find the Feldhouses there that have let's see. Let's find all matches. Okay. 1960 to 1962, it looks like. Alan Feldhaus, probably the guy there. Tell you what, a lot of Feldhouses, though, in that Kentucky area. Probably all the same family, I would imagine.
It would track.
Because we've got an Alan Feldhaus that played at Kentucky. And then, as you have noted throughout here, we've got an Alan Feldhaus that played 20 years later at Eastern Kentucky. We have an Ashton Feldhaus who played women's basketball at UT Martin. A Darren Feldhaus who played at Kentucky in the 80s and 90s. And then a Willie Feldhaus who played at Morehead State in the 80s. So I bet this is all the same family, that area, whatever. But anyways, my point on this is even if it's not those guys specifically, and maybe K-State doesn't get into it this year, but they could. Like, this is the beauty of where Casey Alexander is going to be at, is he's identified these guys that have been talented that he's brought into his program. But think of the guys that have been there that he's gone, oh man, there's something, but they're going to Boise State or some of these like mid-major places where he goes, man, if I just had more resources, they would be coming to play for me here. Now you're going to have those resources. And so many times we talked about the blind spot that this past staff had at K-State was, look, you don't have to kick high school recruiting to the curb completely. Like, I don't know that was ever suggested by people. Go make your hay and live somewhere in that top 150, top 200 player range. Bring a couple of them in and, give a little bit of serious time to it, because you never know what you're going to get. Like Keaton Wagler this year was the number 179 player in the country. The only top 150 that he made was on 24/7. But look how that's worked out for Illinois. Like, those are the types of players that are there. Like, that's still out there. I mean, Dean Wade was like 126 in his class and ended up becoming, one of the better players in K-State basketball history. So, like, in your K-State, like, if you come in as a Big 12 school playing in that sandbox, more times than not, you're going to come out on top with getting that player. It's not going to be a waste of your time. Then you bring him in, and they might be able to provide something. And so that's going to be one of the other intriguing things here is that you're going to have a lot more of those guys that either naturally progress over a couple of years, I would imagine, with Casey Alexander, or you're going to start to have some more of those actual, oh man, this guy came out of nowhere, as opposed to, hey, we just dropped $2.5 million to bring this overrated guy into our program that's going to suck the life out of it. Like, it's going to be a little bit different, I would imagine, with how things are done. And it goes back to the whole, I think there's going to be an adult in the room now that understands how to run a college basketball program. And that goes back to what Gene Taylor was looking for in this cycle, that it's so clear why K-State failed. Like, I don't think Jerome Tang is a bad basketball coach, but I am of the firm belief that Jerome Tang is an awful head basketball coach in college basketball. And so much of what went wrong was from his inability to understand how to be the head coach. So he could go back to being an assistant at Baylor. And like, I will not be surprised in the least if Baylor gets back to playing at a higher level because he's there and there are good things that he can do. But he clearly was not cut out to handle the opportunity he was given. If Casey Alexander doesn't succeed at K-State, it is not going to be because he can't handle being a head coach. And these are some of the things that you need to be a head coach.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That was something that we struggled with, especially the last couple of years as things went south, of just the inability to find anything that was sustainable or consistent with the way the program was run. And I don't think we're going to see that and have that kind of problem. When you look at the roster, we talked about recruits. I don't know, have you guys talked about roster and who he may bring with him? Is that
we haven't gone too deep into that, so you can unload here and give people the Belmont scouting report on who they should want to have in the portal come April, whatever.
Yeah, I like. I mean, depending on who you talk to, Kevin Sweeney said that Tyler Lundblade has eligibility left, has another year left.
Well,
And
I would like to point this out about Tyler Lundblade.
yes.
He was on the same team as a freshman at TCU as PJ Haggerty, who got that year to not count. And very similar in terms of what went down. Let me pull up PJ's stuff just to like make the comparison. Yeah, Haggerty played in 6 games and ended up a total of let's see if I can find the total minutes, but it ended up being roughly around like 50 minutes for the total season that he played. Lundblade basically played 9 games and got close to 27 minutes his freshman year. And then the next year played in 6 games, 4.5 minutes. So I would believe that if PJ Haggerty's got another year next year, which has already been granted to him because everybody's been listing him as a junior, then Tyler Lundblade probably does have another year. And that would seem like a guy that would be married to Casey Alexander and would also be excited about getting back to the power conference level.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you don't want to take the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year, 40
Somebody
plus
else
percent,
will at this level.
yes, someone else will. And he's 40+% the last 2 years on, I think, more than 400 attempts from behind the arc. So he's one of the best shooters in the country, literally. So I think you take him. Drew Sharnowski was first team all MVC as well, kind of a swing forward, can shoot not much of a shooter. Yeah, not much of a shooter, but one of the better inside players for Belmont. Sam Orme was third team, I think, all MVC, solid player, can shoot it a little bit. Then I think the sneaky one maybe is Jack Smiley, his freshman guard, played point guard. And here's the other thing that even I don't think anybody's really talked about with this season for Belmont. Their starting point guard was Nick McLean, who was a transfer from, I think, Eastern Washington. Started the first 15 games and then was lost for the season and has had the highest assist rate on the team, 40%, and then was lost. And then they kind of piecemealed Jack Smiley and a guy named Isaiah West. He was another transfer that became the starter. But Jack Smiley really became one of their better players as a true freshman and scored in double figures, 19, 18 points, I think 3 of the last 8 or 9 games. So he's a guy that's intriguing to me. And then Jabez Jenkins was supposedly their best defender. Not a big scorer, not a great offensive player, but kind of one of those, like you talked about, the traditional mid-major 3 glue guy that does a little bit of everything. So those are guys that really stand out to me. I think we're going to see at least 3, 4, maybe 5 of those guys come, because I think he'll want a base to show people what the Belmont way looks like.
Yeah, I would say that I posted this on the board when people were talking about Belmont signees and what they could bring to K-State. And I'll have a story about all of them coming out in the next few days. But I would guess that a roster looks like 3 to 5 current Belmont players that come to K-State. Probably 1 to 2, probably 2 high school signees that he had at Belmont, and then the rest from the portal. Like, I am not anticipating anybody coming back to K-State that was currently on the roster. So because of that, you probably want to have half of your guys like know Casey Alexander pretty well and know what he wants to do. And then you can fill out the rest with the portal. And like I talked about with Mason on our first initial show of, well, you look at Belmont and they had a lot of guys play this season, but nobody outside of Tyler Lundblade played in over 61% of the minutes that Belmont played over the course of the season. So just because he brings 3 to 5 players from Belmont, that doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of those guys are going to be like quote unquote starters right away, because they only played about half the minutes available to them over the course of the season at Belmont. So it does make for an intriguing of like, you bring these guys in, you bring the high school guys in that, I mean, a lot of the Belmont signees, like I talked about before, going through the course of their history, redshirted their first season, they probably know what they're getting into if they step up and are going to be at K-State. And then you look at the rest of the roster you fill out from the portal, and I think that you can sell pretty easily. Like, hey, like a guy like Jack Smiley, like he played a lot for Belmont, and he was one of their better players, but he only played 42% of the minutes that were available for Belmont this past season. So like, it's not a guarantee that he starts at K-State if he was to come over. Like, you could sell that to somebody else. Like, there are a lot of ways that he can really go about this, just because of how deep Belmont was and how many guys that he played. I mean, they had a legitimate 10-man rotation until Nick McLean went down. So because of that, there's a lot of minutes available and a lot of roster spots available, because the roster will probably be at 0.
I also, to that point, on talking about guys coming over, if you're out there thinking, man, that seems like a lot to bring that many from Belmont, like how would that work out? Iowa went 21-12 this season and is essentially a lock to make the NCAA tournament. And they brought 5 players from Drake last year, the Missouri Valley Conference champions. So, like, even no matter what you think, and look, Bennett Sturtz is easily the best player out of anybody from last year's Drake team or this year's Belmont team. So that is very helpful. But they had 4 other guys that Ben McCollum said, you can come with me and we'll go to Iowa. And a majority of those guys played legitimate minutes for Iowa this year and helped them get to the NCAA tournament in year number 1. So, like, that's just to put into perspective how if you get a coach that is that good, and look, Ben McCollum seems to be that good based off what he's done the last couple of years. If Casey Alexander's that, and you bring your guys with you that you know can execute what you want and will do what you expect of them, there's a lot of value in having that, because the line from being able to play in the Missouri Valley but not being able to play in the Big 12 is probably a lot closer than what people would think. But because you can make up for a lot of it with what's up here in your head. This goes back to the playing smart basketball thing. And like, look, this is not, I don't want this to come off as disrespectful, but like there's a reason why Will Spradling was able to be effective for K-State. Will Spradling is no idiot on the basketball court. Like, if you had somebody that was not a smart player that probably had Will Spradling's size and some of his attributes, he's not playing for K-State and he's not playing in the Big 12, you know? Like, that's the kind of thing that I would use as an example here, that don't freak out if Casey Alexander brings, anywhere around 3, 4, 5 of these guys from Belmont, because so many people will get confused with these coaches. They're more infatuated with their agenda as opposed to the winning and losing. Most of them, I am aware that, the most recent history suggests that K-State had a coach that was not too concerned about the wins and losses, more about his agenda. But most of them put that winning first. And so that's where, like, I talk about Iowa this year, but one of those 5 guys that he brought with him from Drake this past season, Isaiah Howard, like, he was towards the very bottom of regular players in scoring for Drake. And he got, near the bottom in minutes. Now, they were pretty balanced in terms of that, but like, he took a step back from what he was doing last season and what was kind of expected of him. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind with all of this. And don't be alarmed if you see 3, 4, 5 Belmont players come. And I will say, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to throw in that Ben McCollum also brought in 2 players that he had committed to Drake with him, too. One is his son.
Even better point. Well, does that count?
But he did bring 2 over. So, like, 5 and 2 is probably the correct number.
I do have a question for you guys, because I think the thing that I want to ask Casey Alexander on Monday is what he views as the number one important thing about his job at K-State. Like, what is he here to do? And he's not going to listen to this, so this is not going to taint the answer he gives. But there is only one right answer that he can give, and it's to win games. Like, I get everybody wants to be a nice guy. You don't want to have a bunch of knuckleheads, but at the end of the day, like, college basketball coaches have to remember, and the good ones do, that they are solely where they're at to win basketball games. If you make good husbands and good fathers along the way, fantastic. Like, that's great. But like, winning games is number one. And so you go, well, but hey, like, didn't you kind of go in on Jerome Tang when there were guys in the program that weren't doing things very well or were kind of being turd balls? Well, yeah, that's true, but they also weren't winning, Like, I don't know, you can look around and Frank had some guys and Bruce had some guys that when they were winning, like, we didn't hear jack about Marcus Foster that freshman year. I can't imagine that he just one day decided to start doing things differently as a sophomore than as a freshman, but the team sucked and you couldn't ignore it and it became a problem. So like, that's the number one thing that I want to hear, but I know you guys will both be busy with other things. If you had a crack at asking something to Casey Alexander, what is something that you would want to hear from him or get his insight on that you're still left wondering after digging in and doing research over the last 72 hours?
I would say what he thinks he has to do differently in recruiting to jump up to the Big 12 versus the Missouri Valley. He's already had to do it once, going from the Ohio Valley to the Missouri Valley. Is it that much bigger of a jump to come to the Big 12? And what does that look like in prioritizing attributes for players that he's going to try to bring here? Because I think that's going to be his biggest issue, is can he bring in players that are good enough in the athleticism and strength and size and the things you have to do to play in the Big 12 and still have the basketball IQ and skill level to play his system? Because he admits he recruits offensive players first. He looks at their offense. He's going to teach them how to play his man-to-man defense. And they've got to be able to handle what he is going to teach and play basketball, smart basketball within the confines of his offense. And what does that look like as you jump from the Missouri Valley to the Big 12? And what does he think that's going to look like? And what's it going to take? So that would be my biggest question.
I think that mine would be more staff related about like what are you looking for from a staff and how is that going to look differently than what you had at Belmont? Like, are you going to potentially go after somebody that has been a power conference assistant or head coach before because he's never done it at this level, even as an assistant? Or is it going to look kind of more like what he did at Belmont? Is he going to try and hire somebody that is more of like a defensive coordinator type? Because that has been his biggest weakness so far at Belmont and at Lipscomb and Stetson. So I'm more interested in like staff makeup and what that really looks like for him, because the last basketball staff seemingly had like no answers, head coach or assistant wise, and I'd like to see a little bit better resumes and more like real teaching from this next wave of assistant coaches as well.
All right. We've gone over an hour. I don't want to ruin your guys' lives or anybody listening to this. Is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you want to unload here? And then I've got one final thing, a question to ask you guys once we wrap up. But I want to make sure you got everything out that you want to throw out there about Casey Alexander.
This isn't necessarily about him, but I think that you're kind of a loser if you're trying to say that this isn't going to work before he coaches a game yet.
Mhm.
Like, until proven otherwise, you should always like at least try to see more of the positive with a head coach, because all of these guys, it's not a perfect business. If you could hire a home run guy every time, everybody would. But it's a very like vocal minority that seems to be like really poo-pooing this hire. But like you gotta at least give him a chance until he proves that it's not
Unless it's Chris
working.
Jans.
Yes. Then at that point, like you have to at least give it a chance. Like it feels very like Chris Kleiman when he was hired for football, that there are people that are just waiting for Casey Alexander's downfall before he even coaches a game.
Yeah, well, and I mean, look at the last two hires that K-State's made in basketball, and I know that they were 10 years apart, but Bruce Weber was pretty well hated when that hire was made, and I get that it ended poorly, but the first 5 years, or well, yeah, the first 6 years were pretty impressive from Bruce, and better than what you probably would have anticipated when you hired him if you're K-State. And then Tang was pretty much universally praised, especially after that first press conference, and we see how that thing turned out. So there's no way to tell, and it'd be equally as annoying if somebody was coming in and trying to tell you that Casey Alexander is going to come in and like, oh yeah, he's going to do exactly what he's done at Belmont. You're going to win you're going to win these conference titles. You're always going to win 23 games every season and all this other. No, but like there's reason to believe that this thing can work. And there's no reason to tell you that this is going to be a total flop. Now, again, there are some of those candidates that could have been out there. If they had to go and, I don't know, hired Denny Walgren after his tenure at Bueller High School, I would have told you that's probably a bad move. But like there aren't many coaches that you're going to be able to do that right now as long as they meet some baseline of requirements. Sorry for the stray at Denny Walgren there. I just
because every coach this cycle we've talked about is the exact same, pretty much.
Scrub that. I don't want to throw Denny under the bus. Just pretend that I said Al Petts, Prairie Hills Middle School.
There you go.
He was
so like
a little Tang-like, if you know what I'm saying.
Like we talked about before, like every candidate this cycle has their strengths and has their weaknesses, and it's not like Casey Alexander's weaknesses are that much different. And Mason highlighted at the beginning of the show of like Josh Schertz, who everybody would have like jumped up and down for, besides the three of us, I think. Yeah. So like that's the weird thing to me is like there's not a head and shoulders candidate that was better than the others. So like if you're not going to give this one a chance, then you then you shouldn't have been like, well, they should have just hired Jared Calhoun or Josh Schertz because they're all about the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fan, anything you got left that you need to get out there?
Not really. I mean, people question the defense, and it hasn't been great. It's been pretty ranked in the 150s in most categories in the 4 factors and defensive efficiency. I think his philosophy on defense is be physical. Like, he's talked about that. He wants them to be physical, but he doesn't want his guys to take chances and get out of position, which leads to fouling, which leads to easy shots at the rim, which leads to open shots. So, I mean, that's one of the traits of his teams is they don't foul very much. Like, the free throw rates they allow are really low because they don't take those dumb chances and get out of position and get out of a stance. And he says, honestly, at some point, defense is want to and effort and toughness. Like, a lot of it, there's technique and there's scheme and there's all things, but at the end of the day, want to, effort, and toughness are kind of the name of the game. He talked about, like, a couple years ago, they were really poor defensively the first 2/3 of the season, and he and the staff got together and just said, "What are we going to do?" And they said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to be physical. We're going to run through screens. We're going to bump every cutter. We're going to be super physical, and we're basically going to foul as much as possible until they call it." And that was their philosophy. And he said their defense got way better. And he used one of those tracks like we used last year with the run that we went on. They were like the top 10 in defense in the country for a stretch of 6 games.
Well, and guess who that philosophy has worked for in the Big 12? Houston and Iowa State.
Yes.
And it worked for West Virginia with Huggins. So, like, there's some merit to it.
So I just thought that was interesting that he does have a philosophy and he plays man-to-man defense, and it's not some like token thing that they try to do, but it's what we talked about earlier and what you like, Mason. He finds offensive players and then teaches them how to play defense, which I'm not opposed to.
Well, and so here's what's kind of fascinating about their defense, because I just went and looked this up. I don't even know what it was that triggered me to think of this, but I wanted to go and look at, how often, at what rate are they allowing threes from their opponent? Like, how much does that make up of their shot? And so I went and looked, and kind of what I was anticipating to like look for a defensive philosophy. The one thing that you could point to and say is they allowed 49% of their opponent's shots this year to be threes. There were only 5 teams worse than them in that regard this season. Worse in quotations. It's not really a better or worse type of thing to do that. Nebraska, Bellarmine, Chicago State, Central Arkansas, South Alabama. But if you go and look through those bottom 60, 70 teams, you're going to actually find a lot of really good teams in college basketball. And why that sticks out to me is that I can remember one of the first, times that Alec Bussey got up to Iowa State, like TJ Otzelberger talked about Iowa State's defensive philosophy. And that's one of the things that Otzelberger is big on, is letting the other team shoot threes. Like, you could say forcing them to, but really Iowa State is going to let teams shoot threes, where if you kind of focus on everything else, like, let that happen, because you're banking on these teams aren't good enough to actually hit it at a level to kill you. Like, this isn't the NBA where if you leave a dude wide open for 3, it's basically automatic. But you go through and you look, like, this is just the bottom 60-ish teams that I can pick out on the fly. But like I already mentioned, Nebraska, they're having a pretty good season if you haven't paid attention. There are plenty of other teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament in that group. But I also mentioned, like, Purdue is in there in that bottom grouping. Duke is in that bottom grouping. UCLA is in that bottom grouping. Like, there are a lot of teams. Iowa State is there. I think Iowa State's like 291 in the amount of threes that they're allowing this year. So it's a pretty common thing that is starting to kind of go around. Michigan is down there as well. They check in at 276 this year. Kansas at 270. And if you go and look, KU's the 10th best defensive team in the country this season. So, like, there's something to this, and I think that's going to be fascinating to kind of watch and see. But, all right, let's finish this up. I have a question for you guys. Are you wishing the worst for Utah State and St. Louis over the last couple days and the next however many weeks, because I have found myself certainly on the Josh Schertz thing, celebrating when bad things have happened to St. Louis. Not even necessarily because I wanted him. Obviously, we just talked about how the three of us were kind of like, I guess, whatever. But there's a little bit of overhype there. But then also this dude thinking that he's too good to go and take one of the jobs available this cycle and robbing St. Louis donors $6 million a year just to not make the NCAA tournament. Like, I'm begging for it to happen. So certainly that one, that just reeks. And I really hope that it bites both teams in the butt, that Schertz never gets the opportunity to move up, and that St. Louis never gets back to having a season like this, which, by the way, like, again, no guarantee they make the NCAA tournament. And then Jared Calhoun, I don't know if it's your fault, probably your agent's fault, but yes, I am rooting for your downfall, especially if you end up at Cincinnati. And that's just going to keep the K-State Cincinnati rivalry alive and well for Drew Galloway, which I very much support. So yes, I do wish the worst for these two teams. Do you guys agree?
So you're hoping for like a Seth Luttrell situation for Josh Schertz.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that would be quite hilarious.
I was rooting against St. Louis today. Part of that is the little Schertz-esque. Part of that is just how bad the bubble is this year, that I would rather have another A-10 team like go and feel like they earned a spot in the NCAA tournament than like an Auburn type or like Oklahoma. So part of that was just like multi-bid A-10 is fine. I'm even go with Schertz making the tournament this year if they lose them in round one. Like that's fine.
I will be banking on that happening.
Calhoun is kind of whatever for me. I will not be rooting for him at Cincinnati, but that's more of just anytime that a coach that K-State is associated with in like a hiring cycle that ends up at a Big 12 school, you're probably rooting against them at their next stop. That will be very fascinating of like how long does Casey Alexander and Jared Calhoun stay at their respective spots? And what's the head-to-head record against or for both of them?
Yeah. It'll be fascinating. Fan, you down to hate these guys?
Probably more. I agree with a lot of what you said about Schertz. The being too good to take a job this cycle thing is a little bit silly.
Let's check in on his resume one last time. Oh yeah, that's right. Dang.
And I've said a couple times during this thing that I didn't understand how he was the clear cut top of the food chain in this hiring cycle. I didn't think he was that much better than Calhoun or Alexander, for that matter, when we looked at it. So that one's weird, and I guess St. Louis finding a bunch of money is also a little bit weird. But
apparently they're loaded. People are telling me. I would never have assumed, but I guess that makes sense.
And then Schertz wanting to become the next Gonzaga, St. Louis. So I guess go for it if you want to do that. Calhoun, a little bit less at Utah State, but I'm with Drew. Once he gets to Cincinnati, bring all the hate you can when they come to the Octagon of Doom, and whenever we go to. Anytime you have more than one fraction in the name of your arena, then I just don't get it. I know it's a bank thing. Isn't that the Fifth Third Arena or whatever?
Yeah, Fifth Third Bank, yes.
So yeah. I hate him partially because of that. Like, that's just dumb.
Yeah. No, look, I just was sitting here thinking and kind of going, I've been like casually checking scores, and I've been, the St. Louis thing's been going back a couple of weeks.
You've been more than casually watching scores for St. Louis. Like the first time that St. Louis lost when Josh Schertz was up as a candidate, you were right there in the
It's
track.
because people were freaking out every time that like Calhoun or Alexander lost during this, this last month. It was like, oh no, we can't hire this guy now because he's losing. Like what? And it's like, have you been paying attention to Josh Schertz? Like He lost more than either of these guys the last month of the season. I'd said it earlier. He's 4-4 in his last 8 games. And then, losing, the most important ones today. So, certainly the St. Louis one, because I just really, you think you're too good for K-State, Providence, Cincinnati, Syracuse? Get over yourself, dude. If you're signing up to stay that long, number one, the donors deserve to have their money wasted at St. Louis. And then, you deserve to just not have anything happen for you moving forward. Because, if you're Gene Taylor, you don't want a guy that goes, no, I don't want that job. I'm gonna get a better one next year. You don't want that guy. You want guys that are going to say, no, I'm going to make this the better job that I could get, because other guys have done that and will continue to do that. So it's a very passive and soft move by Josh Schertz.
Supposedly being a Northeast guy, but not wanting Syracuse is kind of crazy.
Also, what is he? A Northeast guy, but he's coached at Indiana State and St. Louis. That doesn't really seem very Northeast to me. It's northeast of Texas, but it's not Northeast United States. So his whole thing, he's living a lie. I just want that to be known. Josh Schertz is living a lie. So enjoy the NIT, buddy, and we'll see you never, because you will never coach a respectable power conference program. I can guarantee that. And if you do, you will make them a lesser respected high-end program. And you'll probably be Jerome Tang Jr. in 4 seasons. So enjoy it, Josh. Have fun in St. Louis on the wrong side of the river, because I know from Alec Bussey, you would rather live in Western Illinois than Eastern Missouri. So there you go. That's what I have to say about that. Get Josh Schertz out of my face. Do not put him in the tournament tomorrow. All right, we'll get out of here. I don't know. I probably have some scrubbing of myself to do in this, so I probably shouldn't call out high school and middle school basketball coaches by name. I do. The apology was sincere to Denny Waldron. So he was fine, whatever. Just it was boring basketball I had to watch my first 3 years at Buehler. The middle school coach, I'm going to have some deliberations with myself afterwards on if I want to keep that in there, because the guy cut me from the 7th grade team. He was like, "Oh, you can't shoot." And I walked back in there. I said, "This says I can't shoot. That's the only thing that I can do. Have you been paying attention?" And then he got fired mid-season when my brother was a 7th grader for making some comments about parents to the players in practice. It may have involved some. I don't know. There were some things alluded to in practice. Word got out, and the school was like, "Yeah, you're not going to be coaching anymore."
Fired for cause mid-season. I know who that's
at a middle school. I mean, how hard is that to do? That's pretty impressive. They're not going, "Oh, well, wins and losses, whatever." Because if wins and losses had mattered, this guy would have been out of there eons ago. I played with a pretty talented group of athletes in my class in school. And 7th grade, I think they were 500. 8th grade, by the way, shout out Jim Preston, my goat of coaching in Reno County. What can't he do? Basketball, baseball, he's got it all going for him. Where I did make the team, so take that out. I'm not scrubbing his name. I'm leaving it in there. I'm confident with it. But then, I think they lost 2 games, won the league title, and the same thing happened for my brother's team. It was I don't think they won more than 3 games. And then it was league title the next year. It's man, I wonder if there was some difference in the level of coaching there. So, I'm if you get fired for cause from a middle school basketball program, I think I can throw your name out there in a bad comparison's sake for hiring. So, all right, I'm leaving it in there. And you know what? If any of you in USD 313 are going to be haters, I do not care. All right, for Drew, except for my dad. He's probably going to say that he would not have done this, and this is going to be a shameful moment for him. But for Drew Galloway, KSU fan, I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for watching and listening to the KSO Show. Drew and I are back on – well, I'll be here Monday because we got to talk Casey Alexander's press conference, probably with DY, if that guy is still around. I know you haven't heard from him in a while on this show. But we'll get him in there. We'll talk about some things Monday. And then Drew and I on Tuesday